Thank you very much. Super excited to be here, folks. So I really love those closing panels because it gives you the opportunity to ask those questions that you don't get the opportunity to ask during normal talks. And please don't hold back any questions you have in mind. And most importantly, use the Expensify app to upvote the question. Like, I'm gonna pick the one that received more votes. So go over the channel, submit yours, and vote the one that you want to see answered. While you do that, I think we can start with a little bit of a introduction question. So you folks were here at this conference those last 2 days, and I'm curious to know, like, what was the things that got excited you the most? Like, maybe there was a talk, maybe there was like a discussion with someone, questions that someone asked you. So what got you excited over those last two days? Charlotte, maybe you want to start.
I think we got really good news about static Hermes and the new architecture coming. I think with this performance, maybe we have a shot at beating native and Flutter performances.
Awesome. Khalef.
Yeah, I was actually going to mention static Hermes as well. This was a really, really, really nice talk. I had a chance to follow up with Seton afterwards as well. Looks really promising, so we'll see where that takes us.
For me, in terms of the talks, the one from Matt Harrogate, I found just mind-blowing that they took like 500K lines of code and they were able to port it from one language to another. It's just amazing feat of engineering, I guess. And more generally speaking, I was really happy to like connect or reconnect with people in person.
I feel like this question is really unfair because anything that I pick is all the things I didn't pick. But the things that like come to mind for me are seeing the major companies that are using React Native, Khalef's talk about all the places that Microsoft is using React Native, talking to people at Amazon, all the places that Amazon is using React Native, Meta obviously, talking to all the core contributors and all the partner companies and all the things that we're trying to achieve, pushing in the same direction, what we want to help bring to the community, and then of course the things at Meta that we're shipping, like static Hermes and that kind of stuff that we're able to bring to all of you gets me really excited.
I'm like really excited about the like the general maturity that we're getting in as a community of React Native and React. Like I'm looking at React Native EU from like 6 years of attendance, and it seems like talks are getting more and more engaging, in depth, and this is something that excites me. As a community, we have 7 or 8 years. I see a lot of faces that I've seen at the first React Native EU conference. This is like 6, 7 years ago. We're in different places at this time. Some of us had like more impact with our decisions, and I'm so excited by so many different companies adopting React Native, seeking for stability, and also not regarding these 2 days, I'm the most excited by one day before because together with folks here and other core contributors, partners, and community members. We met during the Core Contributor Summit as almost every year. And this is what excites me the most because we still have those conversations. We have like equal say, and Meta and React organization inside is showing us that they are listening, they are investing in those developer relations, and yeah, I'm really, really thankful for that.
Awesome. I'm glad that you mentioned like the stability of our ecosystem, because now like we touched on the like a little bit of the highlights, but how about like some of the lowlights? So if you were to have like a magic wand and you could change something in the React Native ecosystem, like in the framework or something that doesn't really work, what would it be, Michał?
I would undo the Airbnb article.
Okay. Yeah.
Magic wand.
Any other thoughts, folks?
Well, I don't know what you guys think, but I feel like we sometimes have different guidelines in the community to do the same thing. Like when we create a new React Native app, should we go for a bare React Native workflow, or should we go for Expo pre-built? Or to upgrade your React Native app, should you be using the upgrade helper, or go for Expo and let it upgrade? So I'd love to have one clear guideline. I don't know what you guys think.
I can take this one. I would say, like, even for me, if there was something that I could change in the ecosystem right now, is that I feel that as React Native, we tend to reinvent the wheel multiple times, and I wish we could like be more organized and find like fundamental solutions that other libraries and tools can reuse. And I'm glad that we had the Core Contributor Summit like some days ago to actually like help build like a common vision and direction for libraries and frameworks and tools of this ecosystem. But yeah, it's somehow related to what you were saying, Charlotte. I want to pick one question from the audience because you folks are voting, which is great. And yeah, this one, like, I'm curious to hear about it. What do you folks think about server components in React Native? Eli is smiling at me.
I'm really excited to see what people do with server components in React Native. I think there's a couple of things that, I think we're still at the early stages of brainstorming this. I think like a big part of why server components were created was because like React has never had a data fetching story. We've left that to the community, and at Meta we've built Relay, which utilizing GraphQL, you can guarantee there's a single request for that page, but it requires opting into GraphQL. It's like you have to get your company to change your whole backend, all of this kind of stuff, and a big part of why server components was built was to bring what we learned from Relay and GraphQL as a official like data fetching pattern in React that does not require GraphQL. That you can have that kind of single query that's passing down not just data but views. That problem exists in React Native just as it does on web, arguably more so because you do more of those kind of data API requests. You're less connected to a web server. So there's a lot. That's one thing that server components helps with, and that there's a lot more as well.
Awesome. So I want to jump a little bit of another topic. This is another interesting question from Jan. Hello, I'm curious, why is React Native macOS maintained by Microsoft? Is Apple involved in any way, or are they just not invested in React Native?
Yeah, I can take that one. No, Apple is not involved. The reason we started doing it was just because we saw a need for us to be able to run React Native features on desktop. Like as you probably know, we have a lot of products that actually run on macOS as well as Windows. And so in order to make the React Native offering a strong one, we needed the ability to take our experiences and make sure that they run on both desktop platforms. So that was the main reason why we took on that work. I don't think we've ever talked to Apple around whether they're interested in maintaining it, but generally for us, we've been pretty happy with taking that ownership ourselves.
It's been great collaborating with you on that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Especially the recent work to get Fabric up and running, which was awesome. Yeah.
Awesome. So still jumping through the questions and different topic. And on this topic, there are actually multiple questions, but let's pick this one. So Narendra is asking, many libraries are still not ready for new architecture. What is your take on that? So Vojtech, you're a library maintainer of several popular libraries. Maybe you can tell us?
Yeah, so I did migrate a few and then also accepted contributions from a community. Specifically, I think it was the contribution was funded by Expensify. So thanks for that. And so it's clear that this is the new architecture is the new direction. If you look at the React Native directory, you will see that there's 1,000 libraries for React Native, and only some percentage of it has been migrated. And I think it's really important also for the community to step in and contribute. There are resources on how to do it. You can there's an example repo which takes you step by step in the direction of how to do it. And also, of course, there is the interop layer, which was introduced recently. And I think it's just going to be a matter of time, but we'll get there eventually.
Michał, do you have insights on Callstack's libraries also?
Yeah, so we adopted Fabric and Turbo modules to our libraries a while ago, and we were mostly following the guidelines that you and Ricardo prepared specifically. These were really helpful, and for the whole ecosystem, Expensify was like very instrumental to that, because they collaborated with Software Mansion to migrate like more than 20 packages to the new architecture. That is massive work. So big shout out. And also, yeah, there's the interop layer. This is something that should help with getting apps adopting new architecture before the libraries do it. And what I would like to add on top of that is at the summit we were discussing one of the proposals for a like a golden library template that would learn from the lessons that we earned after the Android incident that you were sharing your stories. So I think like multiple things are happening. It's a pity that it takes so long, but the reality is that this is very challenging problem, and yeah.
Just to plug Nico and Ricardo's work and the rest of the team, a lot of the work that we've been doing at Meta has been helping make it easier for libraries to adopt it. When it first came out, the story for libraries was very difficult. A lot of C++, a lot of like hard things involved, and so making that easier to the point now with the interop layer that libraries will work in apps with new architecture without having to do work to get there, which also means that hopefully for unmaintained libraries that more of those will be compatible as well. There might be rough edges, and we'll see how that goes. And libraries can still improve their performance and get better things by adopting the new architecture, but we're really trying to help make that as seamless as possible. Nico and Ricardo have been doing a lot of that work.
Awesome, and I also want to catch the opportunity to thank everyone that tried the interop layer and shared feedback. We were able to fix so many bugs, so thank you again for doing that. Talking about libraries, I want to ask this other question. This is from Mathieu, and it's curious. He's asking, what is the most underrated library in your opinion?
It's like underrated library?
Underrated, yeah.
Does React Native count?
Maybe we can ask something similar, like what is your favorite React Native library, which is maybe not so like one of the popular one?
I mean, I'm pretty biased here, but like one thing that comes to my mind is the React Native testing library. It's like it's just there. It implements the standards that we have from the web, and yeah, we I'm kind of taking it for granted. And there are like great team of engineers working and collaborating on it from Callstack, Maciej, shout out to you, and a lot of folks from BAM, for example. Yeah, and this is this library that makes our apps more resilient to bugs, and it's just there. So also super easy to interop with the web because the interface is basically the same. So.
Vojtech.
I'm not sure if my pick is underrated, but I recently watched a talk from FJS, I think, about Tamagui, which is a kind of a cross-platform UI library set, UI like library or toolkit. So, and that's something I want to try out, see how it operates across the platforms. So that's something I'm kind of stoked about. And then another, which is not necessarily React Native related, but like kind of one of my interests is localization. And in that space, I'm also helping out with a library called Lingui.js, which helps to localize your apps. And I think that's also a cool library.
Okay, so Michał, you mentioned web, and I have like a really hot question that was higher up in the list and I missed, which is from Christoph, asking, what is the state of React Native Web in 2023, and what we can expect in the future? I know there were talks from Khalef and like a lot of opinions about it. Who wants to take this one?
There's a lot that we want to do with web and web compatibility in React Native. We think that React Native Web has helped a lot of people bring React Native experiences to web. I think one of the things that we are looking at is what does it look like to bring React Web experiences to React Native. In Lorenzo's talk, there was some mention about like the APIs that exist in the browser. How do we bring those to React Native? We're also thinking about like, divs and other kind of window things. How do we run those on React Native? And so, React Native Web is a fantastic library that will continue being a huge part of our ecosystem. There's a lot of that we're taking like the best ideas there, and we're trying to figure out like how do we expand that into a thing that also helps the developers on React Web be more compatible instead of the developers on React Native be more compatible.
Yeah, and just to add a little bit to that, like very often we get into conversations, at least internally at Microsoft, around whether people should use React Native or should use web views when hosting their experiences. Where web views tend to win is in the simplicity of just having a layer that just works, and you can just take your code and have it. You take it from web, you bring it into a web view, and you just have your experience up and running. And I think that once we have that same type of set of APIs exposed in React Native, it will actually make a massive difference. So that's something that personally I'm really, really, really looking forward to.
Awesome. So I see another question, which is like an existential question for every React Native developer. And I want to ask you all to collect your opinion. It's from Satin, and he asks, should I start my new project in Expo or bare React Native, and why?
I would definitely go for Expo. At BAM, where we launch lots of apps, we're a consultancy, and from now on, our politics is use Expo. And if at some point you need to eject, you still can, but Expo it's a huge ecosystem, and there surely are some parts that can be useful for you. And for all of our apps, we use Expo from now on.
Yeah, I think like at this point it's not even ejecting. This is like something from 3 or 4 years ago, and this is like common misconception. Expo did a large leap in the last few years towards better React Native compatibility. So it's like today it's on top of React Native instead of replacing some parts. Although it's replacing some parts like Expo modules, like instead of turbo modules. But anyway. Today it's more like using pre-built, right, instead of ejecting. I would for most of the cases I would recommend starting with Expo. It's better developer experience. Like they're very DX focused company. They treat itself as a like whole Expo experience as a product, something that React Native as a library, as a framework, but let's call it library, kinda lacks, and Expo is filling this gap nicely. However, if you're like want to have your, if you're starting from a native app and you're in you want to start a brownfield integration for React Native, then starting with CLI. Would probably make more sense because it's less new things for native developers to learn, and yeah, we're still working on improving the experience for the like default CLI that we have in the community. We know it's far away from perfect, but we want it to be like a good enough starting experience for for any developer that would want to try React Native.
I will add one of the things that are like strong pro Expo is the story around upgrades, because you kind of just run a few commands and your React Native app is upgraded. And you can kind of delete these iOS and Android folders and run pre-built, and Expo will like magically generate them for you, so, which is kind of magical, but also at the same time, you need to remember that, you know, it is a React Native app, it is a native app, so those iOS and Android folders, as scary as they might be,
yeah,
like,
and
you still need them. They're there.
And what's cool about it, you can start with the regular CLI and you can install config plugins on top of that. You can have pre-built as a like extending React Native CLI app with the pre-built capabilities. So don't be afraid of adding Expo as a dependency. It doesn't bite. It doesn't add too much to the whole bundle size. You can check it. Last time I did, it was like 150 kilobytes to the whole app bundle, I think. So yeah, that's not a lot of overhead for most of the apps out there.
If I was creating a new app, I would be using Expo. Totally.
I've been playing a little bit on some side projects with it, and like the developer experience is just like awesome. So there is another one, which is a lot of reactions, like with an ours, which I want to ask now. It's from Rory. He asks, any thoughts on deprecating the animated module in React Native Core as part of the Link Core initiative and standardizing on Reanimated as the first-party solution for animations in React Native?
I'll ask another question. When CSS animations in React Native?
I think there's a lot here in this question. You know, I think on the CSS animation side, that's, I don't have an answer there, but like that kind of idea is in line with how we bring web experiences, web applications to React Native. There's a lot that we need to figure out in that space. I don't have an answer for you, but it makes sense logically why that would be a reasonable question. I think there's a lot kind of in that category as well of common third-party packages that people use instead of the ones that are in core. And that's both a signal and something we should be thinking about. I think the new architecture does change some of that, not necessarily for animations, but for other libraries. You know, as we think about flat list and flash list as another common example that comes up here. And so I think these are things to talk about, but we don't have answers yet.
Awesome. So I have another question that I see passing that I really liked. It's from Lukasz. He asks, how do you get to 10x the adoption of React Native? That's a tough question because we got asked that some days ago. And so yeah, looking at React Native ecosystem, if we were to envision what would be the strategy to increase the adoption of React Native as a framework, what would you do?
Oh, well, you could write desktop apps because we don't have as many today, so there's still a large market there that we haven't tapped into. And as we were discussing earlier, the skill set that you have already for building mobile applications is fully transferable over to the desktop, where you can build on top of React Native for Windows or React Native for macOS. That would be one way to actually increase that reach of React Native.
Yeah, so I can extend that question to make it easy for anyone, like any new platform or old platform that React Native is not there yet, to adopt React Native easily with all the benefits of its package ecosystem, and I think like in this many platform vision, that the really nice interop between web and React Native is going to be crucial, and I'm super happy that multiple parties like Meta and Microsoft working in the same direction to make that vision happen. I'm sure it's gonna take some time to get the abstractions right and where to put certain places, certain things. But yeah, this web interop and easier story for getting into new platforms, because who knows, maybe today we don't have React Native on some platforms because it's so hard to get into it, and you need to be like a very large enterprise to do it.
I'm going to say try to bring in the developers from those other platforms. For React developers, try to explain that they can use React Native Web, or they can use React Native to build web apps, and then later down the line, if they want to build a native app, it's going to be a lot easier rather than realizing suddenly, oh, so we have a web app, and now we want a React Native or a native app. If you start with these with the right assumptions from the beginning, that brings them in, and also then from the native platforms, bring in also more developers and explain to iOS engineers, hey, using React Native is not gonna take your job, and it's not a bad thing to use it.
I think we need it to be a widely accepted truth that if you have a website written in React as a business, if you need a mobile app or something native, whether that's mobile or desktop or any other platform, using anything other than React to do that is a wrong choice. I think we need to get to the place where that is both true and widely accepted.
It's interesting thought, and like it's going to be a challenge, but yeah, super excited to be on board on that. And what you said, Vojtech, you're totally right. Whenever I go to DroidCon and I mention that I'm a React Native engineer, people smile at me, as you can imagine. But yeah, we have like a huge market in the brownfield space and like the native developer space that like it's an area where I believe we can grow a lot. There are a category of questions that I'm like sort of avoiding intentionally, but now that we are sort of near to the end of this panel, I think it's time to start asking. The first one is like, when will the new architecture be stable? And
you tell us, Nico.
Okay, so next question.
Soon.
Next question, which was actually the first one, is like when we can expect React Native 1.0 and what we should expect from it. And someone else, since you haven't seen the questions that were there, someone else even asked, we are still not in React Native version 1.0, and what does this milestone will mean? Eli.
I think the thing to talk about here is what is our intent? What do we have to achieve in order to be able to roll it out? Because it's not so much time-based as it's like what's required to get there. And a lot of the stuff for 1.0 is that we want to be able to give people a stable release. Like, we don't want to release as fast as we are today, going to 2.0 and 3.0 and 4.0. That defeats the purpose. That's not what any of you actually want from React Native. And so in order to get to the stability that you all want, we have to change both the architecture that everybody's on, a bunch of our processes for what causes us to ship breaking changes. We're still figuring out like what causes all of breaking changes, what cadence could we get to? Apple releases and Android releases, do those necessitate breaking changes? How do we work around? Like, there's so much here to figure out to get you all what you need. And we think it would be doing you a disservice if we just like, it's 1.0 now, and then like didn't actually change how we operated.
As a fun note, I'm going to say I remember reading through some, I think it was build Gradle of some library, and I remember it's reading the major, minor, fixed version of React Native, and then looking at the minor, the minor version and comparing it. Is it bigger than 70? If that do something. And of course, if React Native goes to 1.0, this number is going to be 0, and that code is probably not going to work the way it was meant to work, because React Native will be 1.0, like hooray, stable, but the library is actually going to break. So, yeah, I hope this is going to get fixed.
It seems there's like work that we have to do to get there. But yeah, like I want to, like we are at time, you can't really ask more, answer more questions. If you have more, feel free to drop them through. I invite the panelists to go over the chat and answer whatever you feel like you have relevant context. And yeah, I want to thank you very much again for being with us on stage, and thank you all for asking those questions.